The break room coffee is burnt again, and you drink it anyway because the good machine is on the third floor and you don't feel like taking the elevator up just to come back down. That's where you're standing when David walks in looking like he hasn't slept. He's your boss. Vice president, corner office, the kind of man who wears a quarter zip that costs more than your car payment used to before you paid the car off. He pours himself a cup, stares into it like it owes him money, and says, to no one, to the room, to the fluorescent hum, "We're going to have to cancel Cabo. Karen's not going to be happy." You nod like you understand. You don't, not yet. Because David makes $185,000 a year and you make 60, and he just told you he can't afford a vacation you were never going to take in the first place. So here's what you're going to understand by the end of this. How someone making 60 grand ended up $255,000 richer than his own boss. Not a trick, not an inheritance, not crypto. $255,000 of daylight between your net worth and his, running in the wrong direction according to everything you were ever taught. Hold that number. We're going to earn it together, line by line. And by the end of these 12 minutes, one thing is going to be clear. One of you is quietly, structurally, boringly rich. And it isn't the one with the title. You're 31, administrative coordinator, which is a fancy way of saying you keep the calendars of people more important than you from colliding. 60 grand, W-2, direct deposit hits every other Friday around 2 a.m., and you know this because for years you used to refresh the app at 2:04 like the number might surprise you. It never did. You stopped checking. That's its own kind of wealth, not checking. Gross is about $5,000 a month. After federal, after your state's cut, after FICA taking its 7.65% like it always does, you clear somewhere around $4,100. You have a roommate named Priya who works nights at a hospital and communicates primarily through post-it notes on the fridge. Your half of the rent is $750. You drive a 2015 Hyundai Elantra with 118,000 miles and a check engine light you've had diagnosed 3 separate times. It's a loose gas cap sensor. It's nothing. It's been nothing for 2 years. The car is paid off. It has been paid off for 4 years, and every single month it isn't costing you anything is a month the money went somewhere else. You don't feel poor. This is the part nobody warns you about. You feel calm. Let me show you David's month because David would never show it to you, because David doesn't fully look at it himself. 15,400 gross monthly. Sounds like a different planet. But taxes don't love him either. At his bracket, his all-in effective rate runs north of 30% once you stack federal, state, and the payroll pieces, so he nets somewhere around 10,500. $10,500 a month landing in a Chase account. And here is where you stop and watch the money leave. The mortgage is $3,800. It's a 5-bedroom in the suburb, the good school district, the one where the sign at the entrance is carved stone, not aluminum. $3,800 a month to live where the neighbors have the same SUV. Which brings us to the SUV, the German one. He financed $92,000 at around 6% over 72 months, and that payment is $1,525 every month for 6 years. Say that number out loud. $1,500 a month for a machine that lost roughly 11 grand in value the week he drove it home. That's not David being dumb. That's just what cars do. Edmunds will tell you a new vehicle sheds around 20% of its value in year 1, and David bought the version of that math with the biggest possible number attached. Private school for the 2 kids, $28,000 a year, which is $23.33 a month. And the country club, $700 a month in dues, which the family uses maybe twice a year, so if you do the truly cursed arithmetic, that's about $4,200 per pool visit. Add just those. Mortgage, car, school, club. $8,358 gone, before a single grocery run, before the electric bill, before insurance, before gas in the $92,000 tank, before one dinner out, before $1 goes toward the future. He nets 10.5. He's committed 80% of it before he's awake. And then there was the number he'd never say. His net worth, everything he owns minus everything he owes, the mortgage, the car loan, the balance that creeps up on the 2 credit cards he swears he'll get to, is negative $45,000. He is $185,000 a year in the hole. Now do the ugly, quiet math on your life, the one that takes 11 seconds because there's nothing dramatic in it. Rent, $750. Roth IRA, $583 a month, because the annual limit is 7,000 and you've hit it every year since you were 25, no exceptions. Not the year the transmission went, not the year you didn't get a raise. Another 800 to 1,000 into a brokerage account holding one boring total market index fund, VTI, the single least interesting ticker on earth. Everything else, food, phone, gas, the occasional overpriced concert, the Trader Joe's run where you pretend the frozen dumplings are a decision and not a certainty, runs you about 1,500. You save something like 30 cents of every dollar you keep. And the account balance, the invested one, the number David would not believe if you showed him, sits at roughly $210,000. Same office, same city, same age bracket near enough. You earn $125,000 a year less than your boss, and you are $255,000 ahead of him. There's the number I promised you, there's the daylight. Sit in that for a second, because it should feel impossible, and it isn't, and the reason it isn't is the whole point. Income is what shows up, wealth is what stays. David's income is a river, enormous, loud, and passing straight through him into the ocean of everyone he's paying. Your income is a smaller stream, but you built a reservoir, and every month you divert a little more into it instead of letting it run to the sea. The river doesn't make you rich, the dam does. Go category by category, because the categories are where people lie to themselves. Housing first. David isn't paying $3,800 a month for shelter. Shelter is cheaper than that. He's paying for the zip code, for the stone sign, for the version of himself that lives somewhere the group chat approves of. You pay $750 for the exact same 8 hours of unconsciousness he gets. You both wake up. One of you wakes up $3,100 lighter every single month for the privilege of the address. The cars. And this is where I need you to feel something, because this is the one that got me. That $1,500 car payment isn't $1,500. Money has a second price, the one nobody rings up at the register, and it's called opportunity cost, what that dollar would have become if you'd let it grow instead of spending it. $1,500 a month invested instead, at the market's long-run average of around 7% after inflation, the S&P's historical real return roughly, don't hold me to the decimal, becomes something obscene over 20 years. Call it in the ballpark of $750,000. David isn't driving a $92,000 SUV. He's driving a $700,000 retirement he'll never meet, and it has heated seats, and he loves it, and it's killing him slowly in a way no cardiologist can find. You drive a Hyundai with a lying check engine light. The difference between your car and his car, invested, is a house. Then there's the thing that ate David alive so gradually he never felt the teeth. Every raise he ever got, he spent. Not foolishly, reasonably. Each promotion came with a slightly nicer version of his own life, and the nicer version became the floor, never the ceiling. Economists have a cold name for this, the hedonic treadmill. You speed up, the belt speeds up, you stay exactly where you are, more tired. David's 185 now feels the way his 60 felt a decade ago, because he inflated to meet it every step, and now the 185 is the tightest money he's ever had. You got raises too, 3 of them since you started. You want to know what you did with the last one? You went home, opened the Fidelity app, and increased the auto transfer by the exact amount of the raise before it ever touched your checking account. You never saw it. You can't miss a dinner you were never handed the menu for. Here's the reframe. Before you decide I'm telling you to hate joy, this is not a story about being cheap. Being cheap is misery with a spreadsheet. You're not miserable. You go to concerts. You bought Priya a genuinely stupid, genuinely expensive espresso machine for her birthday, and watched her cry over it at 6 a.m. before a night shift. The behaviors that built your reservoir have almost nothing to do with deprivation, and almost everything to do with a single unsexy decision made once, and then defended forever. Pay the reservoir first, live on what's left, let the market and time do the part that feels like magic, but is actually just patience wearing a disguise. And now the part I owe you, because a video that only flatters you is lying to you. It is genuinely easier for you than for David, and not only in the ways you'd like. You have a roommate. He has 2 children, and those children are not a line item you get to feel smug about. They are human beings who need shoes and dentists and dinner, and even if you strip away the private school as a choice, which it is, the kids themselves are a real and honorable expense that you simply do not carry. You have no dependents, a paid-off car, and a low cost of living because you engineered one. In a genuinely high-cost city, on 60 grand, with a kid, the math I just walked you through gets harder in ways that are not a character flaw. The income gap is real. Pretending it isn't would insult the people it crushes. But, and this is the blade under all of it, the behavioral gap is separate from the income gap. They are 2 different distances. David could close his tomorrow and doesn't. The discipline that built your reservoir doesn't cost money. It costs the willingness to look ordinary while you become free, which is the word for what this actually is. Not rich, free. Because here is what you have that David does not, the thing that has no ticker symbol. If your boss walked into your office Monday and made your life hell, you could quit. Not in a fantasy, in a spreadsheet. $210,000 is somewhere around 3 to 4 years of your entire life, funded, sitting there, waiting. You will probably never use it that way, but you carry it into every meeting like a second spine, and it changes how you speak, and people notice and can't say why. David cannot quit. David is one missed bonus from selling the SUV at a loss. David's title looks like power and functions like a collar. There's a phrase for it, golden handcuffs, and the cruelty of the phrase is the first word. The cage is made of everything he was told to want. You saw it once without meaning to. You walked past his office at 7 p.m. on a Thursday, and the door was open and he was just sitting there, not working, not on the phone, holding his personal card and staring at it, and you understood in one silent second that he was doing the arithmetic of whether it would clear. $185,000 a year, doing the appetizer math. The same math you did in a diner at 24, deciding whether you could get the mozzarella sticks. Except you were 24 and broke, and he is 47 and the highest paid person on the floor. You didn't feel superior. That's the thing you keep waiting to feel, and it never comes. You felt the specific vertigo of realizing the ladder everyone's climbing might not go anywhere, and that half the people above you are just clinging to a higher rung of the same nothing. He caught you looking. He put the card away fast and gave you the smile, the VP smile, the one that says everything's fine, and he said, "Big weekend planned?" And you said, "Not really, might reorganize the pantry." And he laughed the way people laugh at a life they think is small, and you let him, because you weren't about to explain that the pantry was true, and the freedom was truer. He never knew. That's the loss buried in this whole thing, and it isn't your loss, it's his. David went 25 years being genuinely good at his job, genuinely liked, genuinely working harder than you ever will, and no one ever once told him that the raise was not the prize, that the raise was a test he was failing in slow motion, one reasonable upgrade at a time. Nobody teaches this. He learned the opposite from everyone he trusted, and by the time the math would have helped him, the math was already $45,000 underwater. You don't get rich the day the raise lands. You get rich the day you stop letting the raise spend itself. Priya leaves a post-it on the fridge that night. She's seen your account once, by accident, over your shoulder, and she never brought it up until now. The note just says, "So are you like, secretly a millionaire?" And under it, smaller, "We're out of oat milk." You stick it to the cabinet. You leave it there. You go to bed on time, because your money is awake and working the night shift so you don't have to. Now spin the clock forward 15 years. There's a Tuesday. Someone new is standing by that same burnt coffee machine, young, nervous, quietly doing the office math on who's winning and who isn't. And they watch the quiet one walk out early, paid-off car, no title on the door. Everyone on the floor still low-key assuming that's the one who's struggling. And they think, the exact way you once thought about David, that they know precisely which person in that building they want to become. They have no idea. Which one do you think they picked?